Why is Rah Rah still on this doggone team?
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra, Batiste. Alongside me is Jarvis Davis. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, it's a recruiting bonanza again for the Dogs. And you're saying there's only one great dog in the last quarter century? We'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about UGA and how it's handling some things, good and bad, happening off the field, starting with RaRa Thomas. Of course, he was suspended indefinitely Friday afternoon, according to multiple reports, following his Friday morning arrest on 2 counts of misdemeanor battery and 1 count of felony second-degree cruelty to children, Jarvis. So for you, what do you think about Kirby's decision to suspend versus maybe dismiss RaRa from the program?
You know what? I understand it from a head coaching standpoint as far as wanting to get all the details out first. But when you think about having the opportunity to really just say, hey, you know what? This is enough. This is enough. It's time for me to make an example out of someone. And this is not, and the reason why I say that is because this is not RaRa Thomas's first deal, right? When he first transferred to Georgia, he was barely on campus. He had got into a domestic incident. And they charges ultimately end up getting dropped, but it's just like you're not making good decisions and putting yourself to be able to even be in those situations to be charged. So I question some of your from a character standpoint, and I question some of your decision making skills. So here we are again, back in the same boat where it's a domestic type issue, cruelty to children. That is bad, felony, bad. It's just a lot of bad stuff that comes with it, and that's why I question why this dude is still on the team. He has to make an example out of somebody, and he's a starter. So I know for all those people that saying, "Hey, he's only going to do it for a guy that's a no name," but yeah, RaRa Thomas is the guy that needs to be the example because it's time out for stuff like this because they got so much stuff, more stuff to be concerned about than trying to figure out and weed out. Okay, well, he didn't necessarily do what they said he did. Also, the charges are going to be reduced. Like, no, it's time to make an example.
Yeah, and I think, too, Kirby Smart is the type of coach where it doesn't matter whether it's the number one guy on the roster or the last guy on the roster. First or last, I believe he's fair regardless of who you are in that roster and where you sit, whether it's first string, second string, or what have you. So I don't see him as that kind of coach. I know we've seen coaches to make that decision based on, oh gosh, how is that going to impact the team? I don't think that's going to be him because, again, he already made it's clear that Trevor Etienne is going to pay a price for, he's going to be suspended. So, and that's your starting running back. So I think at the end of the day, there's definitely precedent for Kirby Smart saying, hey, I'm going to handle you accordingly, regardless of where you kind of quote unquote rank in the UGA ecosystem. But I do agree with you. It was very interesting to me. I legit thought that we were going to see a very brief yet poignant statement that was cut and dry. RaRa Thomas is no longer with the University of Georgia program. That is what I expected that we were going to see when we first got word of this on Friday afternoon. But I also respect the fact that Kirby is a guy who does believe in redemption, and maybe there are some layers, as you mentioned, layers to this story that we still don't know about. But when we look at the history, it's hard to overlook it. As you mentioned, when he came into the program, there was an issue. He's a transfer from Mississippi State. He entered a pre-trial diversion program last year for a charge of battery, family violence, while a felony charge of false imprisonment was dismissed. Those charges came after that January 23rd, 2023 arrest for an incident with a female in a UGA dorm. So you could kind of, go into a couple different spaces where there have been question marks about who he is and what his character is about. Now, granted, what did make it interesting for me, Jarvis, I don't know about you, but the fact that he was released on bond for just $3,500. And oftentimes your bond is dictated regardless of whether it's misdemeanor or felony, but something will be based on your history. It'll be based on the charges. There will be a number of factors. So I said, well, $3,500 off of, a couple misdemeanors and a felony, maybe that's an indication of where this is currently. But I do think if not careful, this is going to be a challenge that Georgia is going to have to deal with, not just on the field, as far as will Rah Thomas be on the field or will he not be on the field, but all of those questions that will keep looming, all of those questions that will kind of be like a dark cloud that we all wondered after what happened to this program, where they lost a football player, where they lost a staff member, and where Jalen Carter saw this follow him all the way up to his draft. Will this be something that dogs this program, no pun intended, for the rest of the season? Which makes me ask you, JD, when you look at the situation in its totality and the latest in the string of the field off the field issues, we just mentioned ATN, if you will, that keep rearing their heads. Are you concerned about how this will impact this team on the field when this is sort of a year of redemption where the expectation is for them to get back to the national title podium?
Unfortunately, T, I hate to say it like this, but once the season starts, nobody gonna be talking about this. I know it's close to the season, but once these guys get the rolling and get the practicing, and all you're gonna hear are questions about Clemson, because you know how it is in the local media and covering these teams, and nobody don't want their credentials revoked.
Okay, let me challenge that for a second.
Sure,
I agree
why
with you,
not?
by the
Yeah,
way, on
yeah,
local media. There will
mhm,
be no challenge. Who was the one person that asked the question at SEC Media Days? Our own Maria Martin. She was
for
the
sure,
only person, and it wasn't a question that was even posed to Kirby Smart within the SEC Media Days conference at the podium. This was in off podium conversation where she
yeah,
posed the question about some of the off the field issues. But that said, and we're not going to get into it right now. We don't have time. That's a whole other topic. But
for
right
sure.
now, there's a lot of light being shined on Georgia, right or wrong, because these reports have come out saying that they have only graduated at a rate of 41% from like 2016 to now. That's why
Mhm.
I asked the question of, wait a minute, is all this stuff going to start piling on where now that the national media is still in the mix because you're now back in the national title conversation and you're the sort of the top of the mountain for the SEC, therefore the top of the mountain of college football? Is it something that maybe collectively we'll have to pay attention to that could become a diversion?
To be honest with you, it would have to be from the national media. It would have to
Yes.
be from one of those heavy hitters coming in and covering every game and saying, "Hey, coach, I need to get an answer on this," or "I need to get a one-on-one," or something, because especially if Rah Thomas remains on the team.
Yes.
And, because with those pre-child diversion plans, more than likely those are for people who are first-time offenders. So
Hmm.
if he gets convicted with this, like, we might be talking about some jail time to you, or some probation, or being put on probation. You know what I'm saying? And that's where you have to
Hmm.
report and all that stuff. Like, that's just too much. That's why I
Yeah.
say it's time for Kirby to just go ahead and cut bait with this cat, man, because you can't afford to be having national media coming down not talking about football. I know
Yeah.
he doesn't want that. I know he don't want to answer those questions. So right now, in order for not to, be a distraction, or be a diversion, or be a national story from a non-football standpoint, Kirby got to nip this in the bud, and he got to nip it in the bud right now, T.
Indeed, indeed. Now that's some of the not so good off the field issues that this Georgia program is dealing with, but a couple of intriguing and good hires when we talk about off the field uh, issues, or excuse me, off the field topics and goings on for Georgia in the last couple of days. Jarvis, they named Mark Robinson the new director of football operations. He, of course, heads to Athens from Gainesville, where he was named the Gators chief of staff just this past January.
Yeah, you know what? When you talk about bringing a guy like this, he has a vast experience, across the
Yes.
SEC, right? He was at Arkansas, he was at Texas A&M as well. So, and working with Jimbo down there. So when you think about a guy from an admin standpoint, football ops, upgrading facilities. That like this is what this guy does. I was like, can he be an extra set of eyes on why these guys aren't around the facility? So
Right.
can he hire somebody as an assistant? Like, hey man, I need you to follow these cats 17 hours, so when they're not with us, how many hours they're not with us, I need you to be there. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
I think this is a good hire, because when you talk about football operations, like this is going to be the norm going forward.
Yes.
T, I think it's going to be go as far as saying that coaches are going to start hiring general managers, to
Yeah,
be able
that's what
to,
this feels like. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So I feel like this is where college football is going. So for Georgia to kind of bring him in and get somebody of his ilk and his experience, it lets you know that Kirby got a little foresight saying, okay, I know I need to get guys like this on my staff so we can
Yeah.
continue to be the dominant force in the SEC that we have been.
Indeed. And I was thinking too that it kind of reminds you of sort of like a hybrid position where, like you said, maybe a little bit of GM, but maybe also a little bit of player personnel, because you're going to need somebody. You don't want to say babysit, but you are going to need somebody to kind of watch these guys and just make sure that they stay on the straight and narrow. There are going to be trends that continue to happen as NIL evolves. And you kind of look at this position as sort of that guy who maybe is right there with Kirby, kind of, lockstep to be able to keep this program going and evolving. And then, of course, according to multiple sources, Georgia has also hired former Georgia Tech defensive coordinator Andrew Thacker as one of its off-field analysts. And we know that that's something that Kirby has employed as well, sort of revolutionary in what he's doing, kind of forward thinking, because, of course, he brought on Will Muschamp as an analyst, and that analyst, those guys with that deep experience, that seems to bode well for this program too. Now, another thing that bodes well for this program, it's kind of a weekly thing we talk about here on the Atlanta Football Party, because the recruiting bonanza never really stops for the Dogs. So we'll get you up to speed on that when we go between the hedges up next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. So FanDuel is one of those kind of entities that keeps you going if you love sports, but you're kind of like, oh, this is that quiet period right now. Granted, we still got a whole lot going on with Major League Baseball. Obviously, it's trade deadline day, but we're still waiting to ramp up for college football, waiting to ramp up for pro football. Well, there's still a lot that you can do in sports because FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. So think about this. With the trade deadline, you ask yourself in Major League Baseball whether or not things might change as far as the division winners go. Well, as far as the AL East goes, the New York Yankees are still who FanDuel is anticipating will win the East, of course, with moves that they've made at the trade deadline. Bring it down here to the NL East. And yeah, the Braves made some moves, but guess who's still on top? The Phillies. So there's ample opportunity for you to get in the game, stay in the game by betting. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. I'm starting to call it the commitment train, right? It's the gravy train, the commitment train, the hall, whatever you want to call it when it comes to UGA, but it has made a few more stops in Athens in the last couple of days. Jarvis, check this out. And it kind of made me smile, kind of made me chuckle, because, of course, we talked about Georgia being RBU. We talked about Georgia being linebacker U. Now it's kind of sort of becoming DBU, especially if you look at the classes down the road, particularly the class of 2026, starting with the 4-star corner Dominic Kelly out of IMG Academy, announced Monday that he flipped from USC to UGA.
Yeah, this is becoming a trend, right? When you're talking about Travaris Robertson,
Yes.
and just what he's been able to do on the recruiting trail, this the type of
Indeed.
guy that they just love going to steal guys from USC. You think about the prospect Isaiah Gibson, they flipped
Yes.
him, and then had Justice Terry, who decommitted from USC, and apparently Georgia's in the running for him, and he might be making a decision on that soon. So, man, God bless USC. They trying. bless they
Let's
little hearts. Bless they little hearts. They trying. They pull little tick. They just trying to get on this recruiting trail. But Kirby just keep hiring these recruiting beasts,
Yes.
and they just keep going out here and just taking these guys, and they just continue to load up.
Right. And when you look at Lincoln Riley and what he's done at USC, let's just be honest. That expertise and that
A
haul is
little overhyped, just a little bit, just a little
just
bit,
saying, right?
just saying.
Right. Especially if you look on the defensive side of the ball, we take nothing away from what they've been able to do on the offensive side of the ball. You got Heisman Trophy winners out there. You're the quarterback whisperer. But when it comes to defense, and when it comes to, like you said, Tre'Ferris Robertson just doing an amazing job, and Kirby Smart being able to do a job himself, you're really starting to see DBs understand the importance of development, the importance of the ability to play at different positions within the secondary, and how you're going to be prepared for what's the end result always? The NFL. That's what they're all gunning for. So yeah, to get a 4-star in Dominic Kelly and then turn around and land the class of 2026 4-star DB / athlete, John Tavius Wyman out of Jonesboro High per Dogs HQ with our guy Rusty Mansell. The big there is not just that it's a DB, not just that it's a 4-star, but Jarvis, you know what it is. It's local.
Yeah, and Kirby wants to own Georgia. I understand that they have a national brand, and we just talked
Sure.
about it, right?
Yeah.
Being able to snatch commitments from guys who are going across the country.
Right.
Obviously, they want to go. There are reasons that they want to do that, but hey,
Yeah.
like, nah, man, come on home. You
Yeah. And
belong
don't go
here,
to Florida. Don't go to Florida
right?
State. Don't go to Miami, even though you went to
Mm-mm.
IMC Academy. Come here.
Yeah, come here, and that's been the message, and it's been clear as day, and then the prospect out of Jonesboro High, like it's been a minute since Georgia has gotten a guy from there, so he's one of the first guys to come out of their high school, and when you know what happens when guys have go off to school, and especially locally, and they have good experiences,
Indeed.
they go talk to their homeboys. And guess what? Whatever 4-star, 5-star prospect might be considering going somewhere else or going across the country, they're gonna talk to Mr. Wyman and say, "Hey, how's it going down there for you, Athens?" And you know what he's gonna say? "Man, I'm about to get ready to hit this lead, dog. You want to come? Come on down." it's just
Exactly.
it's just a continued process. Once you set that precedent in those schools, like it's so easy to come back and come and get those guys on former teammates and teammates down the road. Even 3 or 4 years down the road. So yeah, like I said, this is the continued frenzy that we talked about, commitment frenzy that Kirby has been going on in this summer.
Right. And then you sneak up and you get a guy like JJ Hanny at 3-star D lineman out of California, and you get him to commit to Georgia Monday. So, like you said, he's getting guys who are local. He's getting guys to flip and say, "Hey, I was going to go cross country, but I'm coming back." And now he's getting a guy who literally is from across the pond. This D lineman just moved to America from Germany 2 years ago. He's part of the class of 2025, planning to graduate in December and be in Athens in January. So again, that speaks to the reach that this program has.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw another position coach that I talked about on this show continuously. Trey
Yes.
Scott. This dude has so much potential. I was just looking at some of his highlights, some of his film work, right? You see the length, 6'5", 275. Oh my gosh. Then when you talk about just the potential, the untapped potential that he has, because he only been playing, varsity football for a year,
Yeah.
and he started, I think he was gonna start like 3 or 4 games in his first year playing. So when
Mhm.
you think about just, and it kind of take me back to when I started playing, right? Because I didn't start playing till my ninth grade year.
Mhm.
And it took me a while just to understand how big I am and how I should be moving people around,
Yes.
or how I should be whooping offensive linemen as a defensive lineman, or all of the techniques that I had to learn and just get comfortable within myself and doing those things and doing them 10,000 times, because we know perfection comes when you get about 10,000 reps, right? So I feel like this. I feel like I know Mr. Hanny. JJ. I feel like I know JJ. I was like, hey man, stick at it. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
because you might be getting your name called 3 or 4 years from now.
Indeed. And some of the prospects, in addition to what you just shared, some of the scouting reports on him said that when you study his game and you identify, just like you said, the length, he's got that twitch, he's got those athletic feet. It may feel like they were saying that it's a stretch, but if
And
he
he's just playing. See,
continues,
he's just out there playing. He's just
exactly,
playing.
that's what they said.
Natural
Imagine
ability.
when he exactly imagine when he gets into a system that actually knows how to take advantage of the quick twitch, excuse me, or knows how to take advantage of all of that raw athleticism, and then is
Yeah.
able to really build him into somebody who can be a monster on a defensive front. And let's just be honest, monsters get built in Athens, in the
Every day.
trenches. Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, so I think this is a really great thing, not just for Georgia, but also for this particular kid. And one more thing that I thought was interesting, because to your point, we often talk here about things going down in the trenches, whether it's on the offensive or the defensive side of the ball. But let's talk about the offensive side real quick. Georgia, of course, could very well have the best O-line in the country this season. It's been one of the best the last several seasons. And of course, they bring back 4 starters. Now, we've also thought about, hey, where is the strength of that line? So interestingly enough, ESPN's Matt Miller kind of weighed in on it. And undoubtedly, the thought is that the strength is at the guard position. Tate Ratledge was named to the first team All SEC preseason team, Dylan Fairchild to the second team, but Fairchild was the one that Miller praised. He said that he felt he was Georgia's best guard. But for you, Jarvis, whether it's Ratledge or whether it's Fairchild as the best guard, what makes UGA so strong at the position overall?
Cause they so doggone deep. Remember, Dylan Fairchild was rotating with Michael Morris last year, and I thought Michael Morris was from a run blocking standpoint. I felt like he was the better in that particular category. Fairchild, I feel like was more better of a pass blocker. As far as from a patient standpoint and being able to stay in front of guys. He was a little bit more nimble than Morris, but Morris was a road grader. I feel last year. So for him to be talking about a guy that was being rotated out, that Kirby was like, you know what? I got to get both of these guys on the field. Let's just go
Yeah.
to show you the depth that they have. And when you're talking about a guy that potentially could be better than Ratledge, and if I can use a video game reference, he's the highest rated guard on the actual game.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of guards that he's better than. So for Miller to kind of point that out, I find it kind of interesting because I feel like Michael Morris is just as good.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. That's why I wanted to get you to weigh in on it real quick, because of course we just finished talking about Tate getting that honor, so to speak, of first team All SEC for the preseason, and Dylan Fairchild being right there. But you're right. I think the strength of it is not just the individual, but kind of how they play collectively, because they just have so much depth to the point where you can actually be like, oh yeah, we'll just put people in the rotation, and you'll get into the rotation at some point, and when you get into the rotation, we'll see exactly what you're able to do. But speaking of embarrassment of riches, we always kind of think about all of the greats that have come through the doors in Athens, including those that have come through in the 21st century. So Jarvis, how sway is there only one dog who made a particular greatest list? We'll talk about that in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by Factor Meals. So with Factor, and let me just say this. It's still warm, it's still sunny. So most of us still want to get our best bodies on, right? I have some work to do. Maybe you have some work to do too, but it's not just about the best body, but it's also about the healthiest. So fueling up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals might be something you want to think of doing. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And we are all on the go. So if we can get something quick and fast that's good, that's a good thing. No matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. With 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. You can crush your wellness goals with dietitian approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off next month. Again, that is Locked On College 50, that's the code, at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. This episode of our Atlanta football party is on screen. Snacks for the kids. What do these have in common? Well, you're probably buying a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibata and get cash back on all of your purchases when you stock up on all of your summer essentials. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 a year. That could cover the cost for an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. So right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked On Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, of course, Jarvis, we know it's still list season, and ESPN took a stab at putting together a list of college football's top 25 players of the 21st century. And the only dog, now granted, it does say 21st century, so that's the caveat, but the only dog who made the cut was David Pollack, who landed at number 15. Is there another dog for you who should have made the cut?
Can I start with one of the running backs, Todd Gurley? Like when you think about what Todd did, dude, it was just absolutely amazing. Running back get picked in the top 10. We know how that became that became how the value of the running back went down, and he was one of the last ones to kind of get picked, that high, because a lot of people wanted the Falcons to pick Todd Gurley in that draft that year. So that was the first one to come to mind. I started thinking about guys on the defensive line, right? You talk about,
Yes.
Richard Seymour and what he
Mhm.
was able to bring and what he ended up going on to do it in the NFL. And recently, Jalen Carter and then just the force that he was. So it just makes me think like, all right, okay, I kind of get the whole David Pollack thing because he's put up ridiculous numbers,
Sure.
but
Absolutely.
it's just I I guess it kind of speaks to Georgia as a whole, as far as those guys. A lot of those guys, in college, they end up going
Mhm.
on to the NFL and being better than what
Yeah.
they were in college, just from a production standpoint, like a
Yeah.
strictly numbers. But Pollard, he put up a lot of numbers in college, didn't necessarily go on to the NFL and do the same, right? Obviously, he had the
Mhm.
injury, happen in Cincinnati. But I feel like I I see one. I was like, okay, but it's just too many names. You talk
Yeah.
about Sean Marino, even Nick Chubb,
Mhm.
just all of those guys. It's just so many guys. It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, why weren't these guys on this list?
Yeah, I was kind of amazed too when I looked at the list. Like, and again, I agree with you. No way does David Pollack not get on the list. It's just that I was confused as to why there weren't others on the list, especially when you start looking at the numbers. And granted, I'll give you one who probably we don't give a lot of credit for. We don't talk about a lot because maybe it didn't quite work out for him on a major level in the NFL, at least for maybe a long period of time. But you look at a guy, and maybe because Jarvis Jones started his career at USC. But
Mhm.
while he was at Georgia, 70 tackles, 19 and a half for loss, 13 and a half for sacks, some All-American recognition, if you will, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, Jack Lambert Trophy winner. I mean, you could go on and on about him. Roquan Smith, another one
Oh
who you
yeah,
could totally talk about. Smith
DC
won
Defensive Player of the Year.
SEC Defensive Player of the Year, Buckus Award winner, 137 tackles, 14 for loss, 6.5 sacks. You could go on and on. And in addition to you talking about, Jalen Carter, kind of looking at Georgia or UGA North or UGA East in Philadelphia, and of course a little bit to Pittsburgh as well. But you think about a guy like a Jordan Davis. I mean, Can we have some commentary about whether or not there's a D tackle that you could talk about who is better than him? I mean, the only Bulldog to win the Outland Trophy. That's the kind of thing. Join David Pollack as the winner of the Bednarik Award. Those are the kinds of things that kind of
Kobe
make me.
Dean, Buckets Award winner as well.
It is. I was just about to say, and
Yeah.
Kobe Dean wraps it up for me as to maybe a couple of other guys who should have been in that mix or could have been in the mix, especially when I looked at the entire list. And to wrap us up here, if you plan on traveling to Tuscaloosa for Georgia, Alabama, or on September 28th, Buc-ee's might make it worth your while because they are actually doing this summer road trip challenge where if you sign up for the contest, you can eat whatever you want to eat and give them a review and they'll actually pay for it. How cool is that?
You know what? When you think about Buc-ee's, T, have you ever been before?
What? I lived in Texas, man, of course.
Yes. So, you know me, I'm all on the brisket tacos, the doggone oh man, oh, what is it? The
I know like the what is the like jerky? It's
like the
not
pecan, the beef jerky. Oh, the beef jerky is
necessarily.
ridiculous. The brisket tacos are amazing. They just have so much stuff, T. And for them to say we're going to pay for it, I absolutely am bowing out on this one. I cannot do this because for me, I don't need anybody telling me, hey, go into this la la land of food and snacks and get
Yeah,
whatever you want and we're going to pay for it. All you gotta do is tell them how you feel about it. No,
right. Yeah,
that is not in my future. I don't need any more cholesterol type levels popping up and everything like that. You know, I'm a year older now, so it's just I'm trying to get my life together. T. I don't need anything like this in my life, but it's a great opportunity for people who are in
you
good
can.
health and and y'all can eat whatever y'all want and don't gain a pound. Yeah, that's cool.
Exactly.
Y'all can do
For
that.
those of you, yeah, for those of you like that, hey, go enjoy Buc-ee's. Congratulations. And you know what, Jarvis, it's not gonna like be a big deal for me because what would get me that excited is if they actually had this kind of challenge for any Whataburger between Athens and Tuscaloosa, because I absolutely love that's where my Texas
It
days
just
as
popped
well.
up out here too. I don't know if you know, but
Oh, yes, I do. I
mm,
know where every last one of them is in the city. Just went to one last Sunday. Yes, I have a problem, good people. Pray for your girl. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta football party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Bulldogs for your second listen and be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party on Thursday.